All right, welcome in once again to the Gamecock Central Radio podcast. Emerson Phillips with Collyn Taylor. We're into the third week of preseason camp, and Collyn, the Gamecocks inching closer to the season opener against North Carolina State on September the 2nd. So what's the latest from practice, Collyn?
So we got to watch a little bit of practice yesterday. The coaching staff puts us in for usually the first three periods, so their first three drills that they do. And we got to see a lot of their Oklahoma drill, or as they call it, the Cox drill. So they pair up players every day to go up against each other and see who can, outman and out-physical the other one. It gets pretty intense, and, Pullman hustlers always running around, slapping helmets and screaming. You can hear them from pretty much anywhere on the field. And then they started doing their special teams install. So, the focus is still on obviously getting the defense down and, ready to go, and offense ready to go too. But now they're kind of focused on, getting the special teams and the kickoff groups and field goal units ready to go for September 2nd over at NC State.
Collyn, talk about special teams. You said they've been working on the special teams more here this week. So, we've been hearing all summer that it's going to be Debo Samuel and Shi Smith in the return game. And we did a podcast last week about some of the specialists. We thought some of the starters were being ironed out there. Give us the latest on specialists and the returners this year for South Carolina.
Right. So, obviously, Debo and A.J. Turner are probably the likely guys to go back on kickoff. And, Alex Wozniak is probably going to be your place kicker. But now the focus turns to who's going to be returning punts. It was a big contentious topic for South Carolina last year. It seemed like they couldn't hold on to the ball half the time. They would drop it. They didn't know when to fair catch. So they're trying out guys that they feel comfortable, maybe not, busting off these huge returns, but being able to catch the ball, kind of knowing when to fair catch, knowing when to let the ball roll into the end zone, things like that. So Shi Smith is the guy they're looking at, Chris Lamons, and Jam Williams, who with Shi, they're both true freshmen. Both are expected to play major roles on the offensive side for Shi and Jam on defense, but they're also going to get their fair share of time on special teams. And now they're kind of focused too on who's going to line up with them. They're working on different drills about block shedding and protecting the punter and things like that. And so you're seeing a lot of different guys. Taylor Stallworth and Hayden Hurst played a little bit. You saw some of the backup linebackers and freshmen, get some work on special teams as kind of gunners and different protective units. So they're starting to narrow things down about who's going to play and who's going to work themselves in the rotation come September 2nd and when the season gets underway.
Collyn, let's talk about the tight ends and how they might be used on special teams.
Yeah, they're being as versatile as possible. So Kyle Markaway's told us that they use 3 tight end sets a lot in practice, and have said that Coleman Hudson loves to use those tight ends on special teams as well. He says they love to use them for kickoff coverages and things like that because they're fast enough and they're physical. And they don't mind getting their hands dirty a little bit and kind of playing those grunt minutes to make sure the team, special teams can go a long way in terms of field position and momentum swings and like that. And so they like to have a lot of different, versatile playmakers on the field to be able to, get the most out of what their kickoff and punt games and things like that.
Yeah. Collyn, I count 6 tight ends on the Gamecock roster, all who could contribute in some way or in some area. Hayden Hurst figures to be the number one guy, but Casey Crosby is in there as well. And you talked about Kyle Markaway, and we've mentioned Jacob August in the past, and Evan Henson. Keel Pollard had a big spring game, 10 catches in the spring. So, how do the Gamecocks go about trying to work all these guys in? And I got to figure special teams will be a way for a lot of them to get on the field. Obviously, Hurst will be a featured target, and Casey Crosby was a solid player last year. He's going to be on the field a good bit, and certainly there'll be room for a couple of the other players to get on also. But I would think special teams would be a way for these guys to get on, particularly for the ones that are deeper on the depth chart.
Right. I think, you look at, Kyle Markaway, who is coming off injury, he redshirted last year after a foot injury. I think he's going to be used primarily on special teams, and he's, seems like he's fine with that. He just wants to be able to get on the field and make an impact. But I think another position group that's probably going to rely, a lot on using young players in those special teams role and in rotations, linebackers. Will Muschamp made a special, working on, block shedding yesterday. He made a special emphasis to go over to the young linebackers and watch them play. The Eldridge Thompsons, the Devon Bowens, the Sherrod Green, make sure that they were doing it and kind of wanted to work on their technique and see how they were performing on special teams, because usually as a young player, that's your first kind of go-to when you get to campus, and then if you perform well on special teams, the coaches feel more comfortable putting you into a game situation where you're on defense or you're on offense. So I think tight ends and linebackers are going to be used pretty heavily in Coleman Hutzler's special teams core.
Gamecock Central Radio, Emerson Phillips with Collyn Taylor. You can download the Gamecock Central Radio app on the App Store and on Google Play. Subscribe to our podcast. Search for Gamecock Central Radio on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other popular services, or just visit radio.GamecockCentral.com. Collyn, let's talk more about the linebacker position. You know, we've been talking about all summer about the Gamecocks looking for depth there. Who are the backups at linebacker right now? You know, Gamecocks feel pretty good about the first three, but it's the backups that the Gamecocks are going to be very young at those backup spots. So talk about linebacker.
Right. So you obviously have Bryson Alloway, Sky Moore, and TJ Brunson who are expected to shoulder the primary load. And Will Muschamp's not been Collyn saying, you know, he's worried about the lack of experience behind them, but he thinks that there's some athletes that can play pretty well. He's pretty high on Eldridge Thompson. Said he's been playing pretty well over the last few scrimmages, or he played well at the scrimmage and the few practices leading up to it. Said that he's becoming more kind of athletic and he's really not worried about making a mistake anymore. He's just going out there and, you know, being the athlete they think they can. So I think Eldridge Thompson's going to be a guy, and then Sherrod Green and Devon Bowen are two guys that the coaching staff feels pretty high about as guys they could work into a rotation behind, you know, Bryson Alloway, Sky Moore, and TJ Brunson. But I think Brunson still becomes somewhat of a question mark too, just because, you know, he was in the rotation last year, but he wasn't really a starter. I think his development is just as key as developing some of those young guys too, because if Brunson can be able to kind of command that defense, or you know, being that middle linebacker, I think that frees up Bryson Alloway and Sky Moore to maybe rush the passer or stop the run. So a lot of question marks right now at linebacker, aside from, you know, Bryson and Sky.
No question. Let's stay with the defense here, Collyn, and talk about the defensive line for a moment. The coaches have basically announced the starters for the most part, or at least on the depth chart. We got the three seniors and the sophomore DJ Wanham starting on the D-line, but the coaches have said great things about Aaron Sterling this fall camp, and some other defensive linemen will factor into this picture as well.
Right. Aaron Sterling is a guy that's quickly working his way up the depth chart. I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the defensive line as, you know, a second-string guy behind maybe Wanham or at the other defensive end spot with Sawyer. I think another guy to look out for is Javon Kinlaw. He's repping with the third string right now, just because, you know, he's still trying to get used to that kind of, you know, college pace and different things like that. But he's a big guy that Lance Thompson feels that if they need to, you know, stop the run at a big time in the game, that they can put him in because he's so big. They said they're going to bring him on pretty slow right now. But I think Javon Kinlaw is the guy that they're going to play well. And obviously you can't discount Brad Johnson, who is repping right now a lot with the Buck position, that kind of free-roaming defensive end. And I think, you know, right now it's kind of a three-headed spear of young talent with Javon Kinlaw, Brad Johnson, and Aaron Sterling, who they think could be somewhat of elite pass rushers this season for South Carolina, or developing elite pass rushers and play pretty well for South Carolina their first year on campus.
All right, and in the secondary, Collyn, last week, Will Muschamp said that he was anxious to see the film from Saturday's scrimmage to check out Keeson Nixon, who had worked at safety, and Muschamp said he wanted to get a look at the film to see how Nixon handled that back there. So what's going on in the secondary right now?
Keeson Nixon's still trying to work his way into that starting spot. Muschamp said after the scrimmage Saturday that, you know, he wants to see Jamarcus King kind of be more consistent. But he's been really impressed with Chris Lamont. Said Chris Lamont is kind of, you know, taking it to another level. He's learned the defense more. He's a bright player, from what Muschamp said. And he's a guy that can play all three positions in the secondary: safety, cornerback, and nickel. So I think they're high on him. And DJ Smith's another guy that they're going to play at safety alongside Lamont and maybe Nixon. And then your cornerbacks, Rashad Fenton's had a pretty good camp from what they said. They've been impressed with him. And right now I think Jan Williams is going to be in that nickel spot. He was repping with the ones last week in practice from what we saw. So it'll depend a lot on, obviously, the next couple weeks. But right now I think you're starting secondaries: DJ Smith, Chris Lamont, Rashad Fenton, Jamarcus King, and Jan Williams. If I had to make a conjecture, still a couple weeks out from game one.
Okay, let's talk about the offense for a moment before we wrap it up today on Gamecock Central Radio. Looks like the starting lineup on the offensive line is coming clear here, Collyn, a little more than 2 weeks out from the season opener. Malik Young figures to be the starter right now at left tackle. Eric Wolford said last week that the coaches just seem a little bit more comfortable with him at that spot. Dennis Daly had worked some with the ones throughout preseason camp, but they feel most comfortable right now with Malik Young.
Right, and I think Malik Young brings a level of consistency that you don't have with Daly. Daly's still somewhat raw. He's coming in from a junior college. He's still trying to learn the college game and adapt to it quickly. And he said he's slimmed down. He's down to about 319. His goal is 315. So he's dropped about 11 pounds since coming to camp. He just has to get stronger and more consistent. And I think the coaches feel like he's going to be a pretty good player for South Carolina. Eric Wolford said he has left tackle ability. And they just have to develop that more and kind of keep pushing him and make sure that he does that. But I think he can start at left tackle at times this year if they want to move Malik Young maybe to the left side of the line and move Zach Bailey in at guard or something like that. There's a lot of things you can do on the offensive line if you put Dennis Daly in at left tackle, Malik Young at right tackle, and you can maybe move Zach Bailey in at left guard or something like that. So there are different things you can do. But I think that Dennis Daly is a guy that the coaches are excited about, and Malik Young is another guy that has experience at South Carolina. He's played the majority of last season. I think he started all 13 games, or he played in all 13 games and started 9 games. So he's a guy that knows what he's doing, and I think the coaches would feel pretty comfortable with him, anchoring, and protecting Jake Bentley's blind side.
Yeah, we feel like right now it's going to be Alan Knott at center, Corey Helms at right guard, Zach Bailey at right tackle, Donnell Stanley healthy again, starting at left guard, and Malik Young at left tackle. But a pretty good group behind these starters that will all play. Dennis Daly, DJ Park, Blake Kerr, and Cedarius Hutcherson is a versatile player who could play tackle or guard.
Right, and they're pretty high on Cedarius Hutcherson, being a redshirt freshman. They think he has tackle ability, too. They're working him right now at guard, just because he's so big and they want more leverage inside. But that's a guy they feel like they could kind of cut and paste in different parts of the offensive line throughout his career, especially if he continues to get better and kind of, bulks up and develops how they think he can develop. So he's a guy that they're pretty high on right now.
Do we have any idea at this point how the coaches plan to split carries between Rico Dowdle and Tyson Williams? A.J. Turner still very much in the mix here at running back as well. We figure he's going to be third down back, situational use for A.J. Turner, but I'm curious to know, how the carries will be split between Dowdle and Williams. Do we know at this point, Collyn?
Right now, we really don't. Even the running backs say they don't know how it's going to be split, but they just know that they're going to be able to rep. They know that 3 backs in the SEC are kind of essential now with the way offenses run, and they think they're all going to be able to impact this team pretty heavily. A.J. Turner, Jake Bentley raved about his ability to catch passes out of the backfield, and Rico and Tyson are both really physical runners that have similar styles. So right now I would say Rico's probably the starter just because he's been here, but Tyson Williams is not far behind him, and then A.J. Turner's kind of that rotational, situational guy that they feel like they can use pretty effectively in the backfield as a kind of almost like a wide receiver and a speed back.
All right, 16 days till the season opener for the South Carolina Gamecocks. Gamecocks and the Wolfpack in Charlotte, Saturday, September the 2nd, 3 o'clock kick on ESPN. Collyn Taylor, thanks for the report today.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me on.
All right, good stuff. That's Collyn Taylor, Gamecock Central staff writer, and I'm Emerson Phillips, and this is Gamecock Central Radio. Thanks for being with us.